And with everyone's permission, we are going to record this call so that we can share this on the Frontier Incubators website as a resource for other incubators and accelerators. We had many folks who reached out that they were very interested in this topic, but were unable to join at this time. And so we're excited to be able to share this with them. And with that, I think we're going to go ahead and get. Great. Thank you everyone for joining for the Frontier Incubators Kickoff webinar. Today we're going to be discussing attracting and selecting the right entrepreneurs and enterprises for your enterprise support organization. We are delighted to be joined by our program partners, Invest to Innovate, Uncharted, Village Capital, Kinara Indonesia, Bilgrow, Kina Foundation, and Miller Center for Social Entrepreneurship. For today's call, a couple of housekeeping notes that we'd like to keep in mind. If you have any questions at all as our partners are sharing, please feel free to share those in the chat. You can either chat to everyone or please feel welcome to chat directly to myself or my colleague, Stephanie Aerosmith from SecondMuse, and we will be happy to incorporate those into our conversation today. With that, we're going to move into a set of introductions from our partners. We're going to have a little bit of a dialogue, and then we want to both incorporate your questions and have space for conversation at the end of today's webinar. Thank you again for joining. Steph, next slide. So to give a little bit of background about the Frontier Incubators program, this is an initiative that is led by the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade as part of the Australian government and their innovationXchange program. And the goal of Frontier Incubators is to build the capacity of a cohort of incubators and accelerators through tailored training, opportunities to grow, and access to expert mentors. Our goal is to develop public resources that can support the broader development of incubators and accelerators around the Asia-Pacific region, and to have the opportunity to connect these programs with one another. Next slide. Our applications are currently open. They will close on July 31st. We'll be announcing our cohort of programs in October of 2018. And those programs that are selected will receive their capacity building support from November 2018 through June 2019. And so as I shared, today's webinar is presented by our consortium partners, SecondMuse and conveners.org, as well as our incredible program partners. And so with that, we're excited to kick off today's webinar. And this is really a conversation designed by program managers for program managers to understand how to find the right enterprises and the right entrepreneurs to fit your programming. Next slide. And so here we'll have the links up for where you can apply to the Frontier Incubators program that once again closes on July 31st. And with that, we're going to pause here and we're going to start the introductions from our program partners. So with that, we'd love to start with Kalsum from Invest to Innovate.
Great. Hi, everybody. My name is Kulsum Lakhani. I'm the founder and CEO of Invest to Innovate. So at I2I or Invest to Innovate, we believe in supporting entrepreneurs in growth markets, and we've been operating in Pakistan for the last 7 years. So that's really where our main office and our main base of operations are, though we've worked in other geographies. So at I2I, we, just as a quick introduction, we have 3 verticals in our work: Incubate, Invest, Insight. The most relevant for today is Incubate, but we are launching, in the middle of launching our first venture capital fund. We have worked really closely with local angel investors in Pakistan, as well as on our Insight arm, we do research and data, which is where we generate most of our revenue in order to help outside players understand the market, as well as internal players navigate and better understand the market when they're operating there. Under our accelerator program, we've been running that for 6 years. We were Pakistan's first startup accelerator program. And we've graduated 35 companies now that have gone on to raise about $6 million of that has been by our female-led companies. So I'm happy to talk about what inclusion means when you design for that in a local context, in selecting the best entrepreneurs for that. Those companies also have gone on to create over 1,000 jobs in Pakistan. We've also licensed our curriculum to programs in Bangladesh. We've supported modules in Ukraine, Iraq, and we're now in the process of scaling our work to Nepal. Right now, but we really are about this ecosystem approach, so I'm excited to talk to you guys about what that means in the context of selecting the best entrepreneurs and attracting the best entrepreneurs to your program.
Thank you so much. Paul, would you like to share next from Vilgro? Oh, Paul, I'm afraid I think you're still on mute.
I'm sorry. Hey, everyone, it's great to be here. I represent Vilgro, co-founded it and run it right now. 17 years. We work with 150 odd companies. 40 have raised follow-on capital, the order of $150 million. 5,000 jobs created, 15 million lives touched. We work in 3 regions, Africa, India, and Southeast Asia. Very excited to be part of this particular webinar and the Frontier Incubators program to share our knowledge and best practices with all the others here. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Next, we have Pamela from Miller Center for Social Entrepreneurship.
Good day, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm very excited to be here. My name is Pamela Roussos. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at Miller Center for Social Entrepreneurship, based at Santa Clara University in the heart of Silicon Valley. And during the last 16 years, we've worked with over 900 social enterprises based in 65 countries and have helped them raise over $660 million and impacted the lives of over 267 million people. Our focus with these entrepreneurs is helping them support their impact model with a business model, and then building operations and investment readiness into the work that they're doing so that they can build sustainable and scalable businesses. We've worked, excuse me, if those that are not talking, mute yourselves, please.
Please mute. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We've also worked with partners around the world that have taken our curriculum and made it their own, and to localize it into contextualize it into the local context. We love to work with partners around the world, and we see this as a way of, we're a university, so being able to support others in their learning and then supporting the entrepreneurs that they're supporting is something that we're passionate about. So thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, Pamela. Appreciate that. Banks, would you like to share next from Uncharted?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Banks from Uncharted. We're based here in the US in Colorado. We use the power of an accelerator to tackle social problems, specific social issues. We also work around the world. We've worked in about 26 countries and licensed our curriculum, basically an accelerator in a box, to teams all over the world. And so we are committed to also supporting organizations that are working to develop social ventures in their own communities, in their own countries. So also really excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Banks. Eva, would you like to share next from Akina?
Kia ora, everyone. I'm going to hand it over to our director, Guy, who's going to do our introduction, and then I'll hand it back to me if that's all right. Over to you, Guy. Should be on the call.
Hope everyone's okay and good today. So Akina Foundation is New Zealand's sort of premier organisation that is supporting the development of the social enterprise sector in New Zealand. We've just recently won a large $5 million program with the New Zealand government to develop the New Zealand social enterprise ecosystem. We also hosted the Social Enterprise World Forum last year in Christchurch, which was the biggest event there held since the Christchurch earthquake, with about 1,800 delegates. We run a series of incubator type capability programs for enterprises at different stages of their development journey, from business idea and startup to more mature growth oriented social enterprises. We have also launched recently New Zealand's first Impact to Enterprise Fund, which closed out first capital raise of about $8 million with the aim of raising a further $7 million. And increasingly we're expanding our scope.
Sorry to interrupt you, Guy. There's some people saying they can't hear you very well. You might just have to turn up your volume.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's a lot better. You might need to repeat some of that.
Sorry, just to say then that we are New Zealand's premier social enterprise development organisation. We were recently mandated by the New Zealand government to develop the sector over the next 3 or 4 years. We've been given a grant of about $5 million to do so. We work with a range of intermediaries in the regions to develop their capability to deliver our content, as well as providing direct assistance to social entrepreneurs through a range of capability building programs such as Thrive and Elevate. These are on our website. We recently launched New Zealand's first enterprise social enterprise investment fund, impact investment fund, and we are expanding our scope into the Pacific and into Southeast Asia. We hosted the World Forum, Social Enterprise World Forum in Christchurch last year, which was a massive event for us and for New Zealand. So kia ora everyone, and thank you.
Thank you, Guy. And Fahar, would you like to share next for Kenara, Indonesia?
Hi, good morning from Jakarta. This is Fajar. Kenara Indonesia is an early stage impact investing company. We were set up 2011 and we first started doing incubation in 2014 when we worked with Indonesia's biggest state-owned bank, Bank Mandiri. And in 2016, we started doing acceleration program specifically catered for impact businesses. We are affiliated with Village Capital. We're part of their VILCAP global community. We're using their curriculum and their approach. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. And with that, perfect tee up to Heather Machanga from VILCAP.
I paid him to say that. So, hi everyone, I'm Heather with Village Capital. Thank you for joining. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. I think we're in all time zones right now. I work with Village Capital. We're based here in DC. Village Capital, we support entrepreneurs working to build a more sustainable and inclusive world. In particular, we connect entrepreneurs with the resources they need to scale. The problem that we're really solving is a concentration of resources in very few people, places, and types of companies. We support companies through sourcing, finding, training, and investing in them. We work in globally and have active investments in Sub-Saharan Africa, India, Latin America, and in the US. In addition, we support entrepreneurs in Southeast Asia, Middle East, and Europe. One of the initiatives that we launched about 2 years ago is the one that Fajar just mentioned, VILCAP Communities, where we leverage our methodology to support entrepreneur support organizations around the world through a licensing model.
Thank you, Heather. So with that, we have a couple questions that we'd like to start off with. The first is, how do you attract the right candidates? And really diving into specifically, what are the channels and the strategies that you find most effective? And Kalsum, I was wondering if we could start with you on that.
Sure. So for an accelerator like us, I think similar to what Kenara is doing and what Bilgrow is obviously doing when we're in country. Being in Pakistan, when we launched Eye2Eye's accelerator program, we were, as I mentioned, the first accelerator. There was an incubator that launched the same year. Now there's so many, which is great. But at the time, so much that we were dependent on in terms of sourcing was really word of mouth. So our first accelerator program was actually very heavily curated. But currently what I can speak to in terms of our strategy now that the ecosystem is actually much more filled up now in terms of other programs that are there, especially incubators that are a really good feeder to us, as well as the fact that we have a lot of other entrepreneurs that have graduated from our program. I would say that a big part of sourcing for us has been not only the people who have graduated from our program who act as massive ambassadors, and I'm sure everyone will speak to that as well, because I think, you know, if you provide value to your entrepreneurs, they will be your best ambassadors going forward. But then also we've continued to partner with a lot of local incubators in Pakistan, which end up being really good feeders into our program. So our program is really unique in Pakistan, as well as maybe globally, because we're not fixed in one city. Our program actually travels in Pakistan. So it's 6 weekends over 4 months. Our companies go to Lahore, Karachi, Islamabad, as well as we do a retreat up in the mountains. So what's good about that is it allows us to source from all around the country versus being, you know, very focused in one city. So that's really helped us as well as the fact of one thing that we've also done is we do physical road shows in terms of physically going to certain cities in Pakistan and doing physical events there where we invite our past entrepreneurs who talk about the program, talk about where they are now, are kind of our best evangelists, but also using it as an opportunity to have a learning session with them in terms of the lessons that they learn, not just from our program, but in their journey as well. So doing that type of brand activation and visibility has also been really important in terms of being able to physically meet with potential entrepreneurs that can be part of applying to eye-to-eye. And then I can talk more later, but just generally how we've also designed the program by being a moving program has allowed for us to be a little bit more inclusive of women, especially, particularly because we're not forcing anyone to leave their operations and move to a different city, leave their families. We create ways to allow for daycare options, ways for women entrepreneurs to be more inclusively involved, which is why we've had 54% women-led companies in our program. So those are just some of the things, but I know we have a ton of presenters, so I want to leave room for everybody to be able to speak as well.
Fajar, I was hoping you could also share about the channels that you've used successfully in Indonesia.
Sure. First, we were fortunate because when we started, there weren't many, if any, impact investment companies in Indonesia. Although the term social enterprise was already quite familiar, but the actual effort to support social enterprises were scattered and less than systematic, I would say. So we managed to build that reputation as one of the first impact investing company who actually support them by providing capacity building as well. But second, we built on that reputation by working with various state-owned businesses, universities, co-working spaces to basically build our network of pipelines. We help them also, so it's not just a one-way thing. We help the co-working spaces, universities, and state-owned enterprise to build their own incubation program, or we provide our service as judges or mentors for their own incubation program. And third, when we are going to launch, like the last one, when we were going to launch the acceleration program, we did a roadshow, basically activation activities, just like what Kalsum did in 3 to 5 cities all over Indonesia. And we built a very strong connection with the local ecosystem players in several regions in Indonesia.
Thank you, Bahar. Pamela, would you also have any perspective from the variety of programs that Miller Center has run?
Yeah, so the way that we think about it is we look at, who touches the social entrepreneurs that we want to attract, and then building trust-based networks around those people that are touching the entrepreneurs that, like I said, that we want to attract. And so when we look at our applications, about a third of them come from what we call internally discovery. And some of the organizations here on the call this evening or today with us are discovery partners, so other incubator and accelerator programs. Also ones that aren't, like Echoing Green and Skoll and those that are working with social entrepreneurs. Then about a third of our applications come from our alumni base, and Kalsoon talked about this. And at the end of every cohort, we always survey our entrepreneurs, and we ask a question around Net Promoter Score. How happy were they, and would they recommend our program to their friends, their social enterprise friends, and we have a very, very high Net Promoter Score, and so we get about a third of our applications coming from our alumni base, and then a third is coming from our staff, who are again kind of thinking about where are these social enterprises, conferences, SOCAP, OC, and then also what are social enterprises, social entrepreneurs reading, Next Billion, Impact Alpha. So we're blogging and producing content in those kinds of places so that we get some visibility. What we've seen over the years, and we've tried to do like Google AdWords and Facebook ads and those kinds of things to do more broad-based, if you will, recruitment. And we found that the poorest quality applications came from those channels. So really focusing and investing on building, like I said, these trust-based networks has been a key part of what we feel is our success in being able to recruit fantastic entrepreneurs.
Thank you, Pamela. And Paul, do you have a few more points to add?
Sure. I won't repeat some of the generic strategies people spoke about here. I think these are great. But I want to add two pieces that we do, I think, slightly differently. We've realized that as an incubator, if we have to add significant value to our incubatees, it's important to get sectorally deep. And therefore, in the sectors that we work with, medical devices, we have very specialized partnerships with partners. So Saving Lives at Birth of the USA is a great program. And I think we partner with VentureWell to incubate companies of theirs in Africa and as well as India. So very focused sector deep campaigns, I think, can help unearth the diamonds that we are actually looking for. So that's point number one. And I would recommend all incubators to really do a very sector specific campaign or a thematic campaign that can help unearth entrepreneurs. So that's point number one. Point number two, because we're based in India, where the ecosystem is far greater developed, there's a whole lot of investors in India, and there's a whole lot of entrepreneurs who actually go to them, and they're not ready to be invested by those people. And that's a great source for us, because those investors point them to us and say, hey, here is the business model with an incubator's funding, it then come back to us. And then it's a perfect conveyor belt that actually kicks off. And our incubation then leads to investment from those downstream investors. So those are additional two pieces that I actually wanted to place for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And I think that brings us to our next question, which is about this question of the screening. How are you looking at quality versus quantity and striking that balance? And I'm wondering if Guy or Eva from Akina might be able to speak to that.
Kia ora koutou. Just a quick introduction, because Guy spoke on behalf of Akina, just to personally introduce myself and my role at Akina. I'm a practitioner of program design and running and delivering programs, so hence why I'm on this call. I suppose the methodology that we're looking at is kind of to touch on that partnerships approach, and that's starting first at what is the need within the ecosystem, because if you are really in tune into what's going on, that will kind of justify what program you design, and then to that you justify what selection criteria you then use. To add to that, one of the things that we're really looking at is at what level they are. So are they a startup ideas stage? Are they sort of 1 to 2 years operating? Do they need to grow? So that's kind of one of the first things that we're looking at in terms of determining quality over quantity. I think it's a different question, but that in the diagnostic sense is really what we're asking a lot of the time. And our selection processes are determined by that, or strategies, or whatever you want to call them. I don't know if you want me to go into detail in particular on what those are, but does that answer your question around quality over quantity? Or I think that's our first step, because that determines how you would scale down to quality initially. And then you'd ask a series of different questions based on what stage they're at.
Perfect. Thank you, Eva. Banks, would you like to share as well?
Yeah, for sure. I think our focus is certainly on quality over quantity. We get hundreds of applications, but I think many of them are not quality applications. And so for us, we would much prefer to see a smaller pool of really quality applications than to see just lots of numbers. And so I agree with Pamela and around, if you're to do sort of ad-based outreach, you're going to get perhaps not great quality. And so really using your pipeline of partners and people who are trusted to get ventures that are relevant for the program is really important. And so one thing I would add would be really being very clear about the value proposition for the program is one of the best ways to get relevant applications. And I think to save time on your team, I mean, our team spends hours and hours and hours wading through applications that are maybe not good fits. And so you save time yourself by being really thoughtful in the front end in terms of making sure that your value proposition and the offering for the program is very concrete, is very clear, and that the selection criteria is transparent. And that, I think, will save you a lot of time trying to wade through applications that are maybe not a good fit. So we certainly want to work smarter and not just get big numbers. And sometimes that means smaller applicant pools, but they come from trusted partners, and that's more valuable for us.
Thank you, Banks. Kalsum, did you have any perspective here you'd like to share as well?
Just in terms of quality over quantity, yeah, I think all of us would probably say quality over quantity. I think just a really quick anecdote to share. So we recently licensed our curriculum. The Pakistani government has launched national incubation centers over the last year and a half in all of Pakistan's major cities. So we licensed our curriculum content of the NIC in Islamabad, in the capital, as well as we're supporting the one in Karachi and Peshawar right now. So really interestingly, just as a quick point to this, for those people who are on the call that are looking to launch incubators in country, we were controlling the curriculum and the content, but we were not controlling the intake. And so it was a really interesting example because our accelerator was actually running at the same time that we were running content for NIC Islamabad, and we had customized the curriculum so it was a bit different. But because we hadn't controlled the intake and they didn't really care about the quantity over the they were caring more about the quantity than the quality because the Pakistani government cares more about outputs and outcomes. It's a bigger, longer conversation. It was a really interesting example of how impactful your curriculum can be if the quality of entrepreneurs are not good. And so it was a really interesting, it was just really interesting to see just next to each other if you had a control group, one that went through your selection process versus ones that hadn't. And I think that's really important to pay attention to. We also do 3 different levels of selection in our program, and we actually engage. We have over 55 local mentors in Pakistan who are the top entrepreneurs and industry experts in the country, and a lot of our investors actually come in as judges in the selection process. And so by getting them involved in that selection at those 3 levels, so first the initial sweep, the reading round, and then the interview round, that also really helps us start to understand and really look at the founders and if they're able to really take constructive criticism, because that's a big thing that we look at in our program. Is we would rather choose, obviously the business model and all of that matter, but really choosing really good entrepreneurs that can take criticism in a really good way that can help their business. That's actually what matters to us the most personally.
And that ties us actually into our next question, which is honing in on these selection criteria. So would love to hear from our partners on how many rounds of selection do you do, and who are those key stakeholders that you're engaging in that selection process?
Are you just asking for anyone to jump in?
Sorry, Pamela, I muted myself before I talked. Pamela, would you like to go next?
Oh, okay, sure. So we do a couple of rounds. So we have the applications. We will screen out those that aren't right. There's been discussions about stage specific. We do that. Our first gate for us is serving the poor. The entrepreneurs that we are working with have to have 50% or more of their customers or beneficiaries, however they call them, serving the poor. And actually, we put that gate in the application. There's 2 questions that they ask. If they don't answer that they're serving the poor, then they don't even get to the rest of the application. So that's kind of the first gate, is serving the poor. And then we'll look at, are they at the right stage for the program that they're applying for? And then we'll do quarter finalist interviews. So 20 minutes, the program manager will talk to the entrepreneurs and get a sense of things that have been talked about. Kalsum was talking about coachability and things like that. We'll get a sense of their business model. Do they have something, an earned income model that feels like it holds water? And that again, that's just the program manager doing that. And then it goes into the semifinalists, and that is a committee of 4 folks, which are made up of program staff and our mentors. And I haven't mentioned that our mentors are a very key aspect to our programs. These are Silicon Valley executives that spend time with the entrepreneurs that are selected into our programs on a weekly basis on Zoom or Skype, working through the curriculum. So our mentors are a part of this the selection process, as well as program staff. And then through that, we have a scoring matrix that we use that everyone is working with. And then at the end, we will sit down together, that interview team, to say, and there's always the clear winners, the clear, no, and then the conversation is around those in the middle. So, I mean, it's an intense process, but we feel like it's the right thing to do in order to, to really get the quality of the entrepreneurs that we want to get to.
Fajar, I believe that you all have only 2 rounds. Would you be willing to speak to your process?
Sure. The first preliminary rounds, we asked the potential participants to fill in online application form. Basically, the questions are about the standard question about their business, whether they have full-time founders, what problem they're trying to solve, whether they've validated their products or services to the market, and so on and so forth. From that process, we then filter down to around 30 or 50 maximum. And then we do a second round of shortlisting. We incorporated the Global Accelerator Learning Initiative questionnaire in the second round. So the potential participants are being asked a more detailed question about their income, about their projection, and so on and so forth. And from that process, we got at least 15, and 12 of them are then invited to our accelerator program.
And can you speak to who is involved in in that decision-making process? Is it a mixture of your staff, mentors, investors, others from the community?
Okay, so we usually have 3 people shortlisting the second round. For the first round, it's mainly our project officers, just ticking the boxes, basically. But the second round, we involve Patamar Capital, our partner from the US, because they're our implementing partners for the program here in Indonesia. They act as the investor, so to speak. And then one from Kinara, and usually another one is from external, because our accelerator is now focused on women-led businesses. So usually the third panelist, the third shortlister would be a woman founder from the relevant sector, because we're sector specific.
Excellent, thank you for that. And we do also have a special guest in our group today, Ian Fisk from the Mentor Capital Network. And Ian, a mentor who has helped in the selection process for MCN over many years. You have a very robust process, and I'm hoping you might share some of your insights as well.
Okay, thank you. So we also have the every year I call grantsforyourbusiness.com and beg with them to please take us off their list, and then they don't. So we get the random junk as well. So our process looks like this. A lot of what Pamela said. So we work with a lot of partners. We make a point of taking applications made to other programs. I'm a strong believer that the entrepreneurs should not be filling out paperwork. They should be running their businesses. So since most of us ask 80 to 90% of the same questions as each other, because I've read and or designed several of your application processes, actually not several on this list, but several around the world. So if you apply to any standard application, we'll just take it as our application. The applications are 2-page, they're short, they're very simple. We do the whole 1/3 are obviously gone. We never have anyone who's obviously in, because we're building the cohort as they connect to each other. So we're a nonprofit. So it's actually, we don't take the best possible companies. We take the companies we can most move forward. And part of their experience is being in the cohort with each other and the ongoing community. First round, we have our mentors. Anyone who's been with us before as a reviewer, as a mentor, as an advisor can be a judge. We want people who know what we're looking for. We do a very simple scoring. This narrows it down. We do about 60 video interviews for 20 slots. And the choosing is in part based on a couple of clumps of 3 or 4 companies in cook stoves or water or empowerment or what have you. Sort of, we're not industry specific for the whole cohort, but we're industry. We try and have a couple in each industry so that the folks who are working with them don't just have one company, so that we can engage our mentors with 3 or 4 companies in their area. And then we always take 1 or 2 wild cards just because it's frankly fun and interesting. And I don't want to pretend that I know everything that's going on in the field, and maybe there's an industry that I'm not familiar with. Yeah, so that's the general idea.
Thank you so much. And so one of the pieces we wanted to touch on as well was incentives. You know, some programs charge fees. What are, I think, Banks, you made a really good point about being crystal clear about the value proposition is one way to incentivize getting people to apply. But was wondering if any of our panelists can share what incentives they've used, especially if you were early in your process and there, maybe didn't have the brand recognition yet, or the relationships in place to be able to pull in a lot of leads from partners. And if there's any of our panelists who have a particular standing on this, please feel free to raise your hand.
Yeah, maybe can I just make 2 points? I think we've used a combination of equity investments and exiting to our downstream investors. Not really as successful as we thought it will be, but increasingly a combination of equity and revenue share as the companies actually start growing their revenues, which is a little bit of a demotivator for the next round investor, because they say, hey, why are you taking your monies out? Convert that into equity. But I think a combination of equity and a small rev share as opposed to a fee, I think is an interesting model that we're seeing slowly working.
I'll chime in here. This is Heather from Village Capital. So we don't charge our entrepreneurs to participate in the program, but in terms of incentivizing them to apply and take the time out of their busy schedule to participate, one of the key values, in addition to access to the network and access, curated introductions to investors, and we also, for many of our programs, have investment capital, which is another huge incentive for participating. One of the things that our companies find very valuable is our model is very much based on peer review and peer feedback. So the companies have an opportunity to get constructive feedback from their peers, which is not something that traditionally exists in the the world at large, there's very little incentive for us to provide each other constructive feedback on areas that we can improve, on weaknesses in our businesses, and to poke holes. But these companies spend 12 days over the course of 4 months together doing exactly that, and have our investment decision is based on this constructive feedback in this model, so they have every incentive to be very honest and transparent with each other. The other thing, and this goes kind of to the program design element, just when you're thinking about how you're going to design your program in sourcing, we tend to focus on sector-specific programs, which means that companies have access to the mentors that participate in the program are all relevant to them, and there's more sector-specific or industry-specific substance to it, which our companies tend to find a lot of value in.
Excellent, thank you, Heather. And this one will be a final question to the full panel, so I'll ask each of you in turn. But if you can share one thing that didn't work that your organization tried over the years, maybe you had hoped it would bring in the right candidates and it just didn't, so that hopefully we can learn from one another's mistakes over time. And so if anyone is urgent to go first, otherwise I'm just gonna kind of start on my screen, upper left. Kalsoon, would you be willing to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're always finding stuff that doesn't work. I mean, I think our program has been pretty iterative over this has been this will be our 7th year. So actually what Paul said was interesting. We offer equity, we take equity, but so just almost kind of both the answer in the last question as well as this. We were first coming in offering, like saying that we're only going to take equity. And in Pakistan, which I think is the case for a lot of emerging markets, particularly markets that are very new ecosystems for incubators and accelerators. So I guess the players that are applying for this, equity is kind of culturally something that people aren't really familiar with. And so one thing that we've done as a result is we give an option. We either say we'll take equity or we'll take a flat fee when they raise funding. Just mainly because equity for us is still, I mean, it's a cost center, the accelerator anyway, with what we do at eye2eye. So at the end of the day, we're not making a ton of money off the equity anyway, right? So we offer that. Actually, majority of our entrepreneurs end up choosing the flat fee model versus the equity model. It's something that is starting to change now that people are becoming more familiar with equity share and what that means. The legal regulatory environments being it doesn't really have sweat equity in our environment in Pakistan, so things are changing. One other thing that is also interesting, and this is almost contradictory a little bit to something that Paul said, and I know Village Capital does sector specific. Sector specific actually didn't work with us in Pakistan, and it's because we've been agnostic. We have focused a lot on women-led companies. We did one specific program that was DFID funded, so UK aid funded, where we looked at companies that had beneficiaries that were supporting child mortality or maternal health. And while that's obviously great, and I think this is also something to think about when people are looking for funding for their programs. Unfortunately, our funder had too much power in the decision-making of selecting our entrepreneurs, as well as the fact that it was because we are a business accelerator, our impact is baked into what we do, but these companies present to hardcore investors at the end of the day. Our companies ended up being very development oriented which is not a bad thing. It just was against kind of what we were doing. And so as a result, I would say that was our weakest cohort that we've ever had. We also narrowed our pipeline very considerably, which in ecosystems that are very new, when pipeline is an issue, and you narrow it that specifically. So not saying sector specific is bad, just saying that very specific sector and segment didn't really allow for us to be able to choose the right entrepreneurs. And so I think for us, it's allowed us to be a little bit more selective about our funders and who we have sponsor the program in terms of the type of control that we have in that intake, because we know how to choose the best entrepreneurs. That's what we've been doing for 7 years.
Great, thank you so much. Banks, would you like to go next?
Sure. I think the one thing, just from a very simple process perspective, is that we've oftentimes rushed selection and not given ourselves enough time to fully select and do the proper due diligence on companies. So one recommendation, I guess, would be just to give yourself plenty of time before the program begins, before the selected companies are able to begin to make accommodations and decisions about their participation in the program, to give yourself enough time to actually do a proper vetting. I think when we've been on a short timeline, that's when we've made probably the worst decisions, or just haven't done proper due diligence. And so there's a lot of, it can be tempting to kind of fit in programs or try to do shortcuts. And I guess I'd recommend just like following a good process and be very patient with it.
Excellent, thank you. Fajar, would you like to go next?
Probably the only thing that I add, although we aim to find the best fit of participants for our programs, sometimes we allocate 1 to 2 slots for wildcards. So companies who are not yet ready but have potential to be ready. So although we know from the very start they will not make it to the top 2 or top 4, but we still invite them anyway because of several considerations. One, geographic representation. We want to make sure that some companies from outside Java, for example, from Eastern Indonesia, are being accommodated and can learn something. And most of the times, they are not yet at that stage where they're ready to come to our program, but we still invite them anyway.
Thank you for sharing. Eva or Guy from Akana?
A few things, and I'll just contribute a couple of things to your previous question. Thinking about incentives, we do differentiated pricing model, which has worked quite well. And I won't go into detail about that. But also what I push a lot, because I've seen a huge need among social entrepreneurs, is a sense of isolation. They don't have a community. So one of the big incentives is we create a community here, you're not alone, and what that means. And that's actually been one of the biggest incentives. In terms of what we've done wrong, I think not charging. We haven't charged for our programs, and I've seen a lack of commitment from participants, even as simple as just put a deposit and sign an expectation agreement has seen really positive results, not necessarily a whole program fee. But then again, we have done differentiated pricing model to sort of come up to help some of the challenges that enterprises have to pay a program fee. The other thing that we haven't necessarily done well is we've just said we can subsidise this, but we haven't supported or linked or connected enterprises up to funders who will give capability building grants. So that's an area that we are improving in. And the last challenge I would say would be potentially, it's around working with Indigenous community. So I'm Māori here in New Zealand. We ran a program that was in a community that had high Indigenous population. We didn't customise it enough. We didn't have the cultural capacities and organisation to deliver it, and we suffered because of that. So again, that comes down to knowing your local context, knowing who you're delivering something for.
Excellent, thank you. Heather, would you like to go next?
Sure, sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I mean, I think the team, everyone else on the call has shared some great learnings. I kind of want to just highlight what Colson said around partner alignment. I don't think that can be understated. There needs to be an aligned idea of what you're looking for in the entrepreneurs with your partner, and you have to be really driving that conversation as the expert, as the organization that understands the needs of those entrepreneurs. And so for us, we are investors and we pre-commit capital to a program, which means that our only decision-making power is in the sourcing and in the selection of the actual cohort. So being very closely aligned with our partners is important. The other thing I would say is this kind of goes a little bit to the quantity versus quality question, but a lot of our outreach is outbound. So we make a lot of we reach out to a lot of entrepreneurs, and we actually have conversations with them well before they're even at the application phase to encourage entrepreneurs that we're excited about or interested in or think are a good fit, but maybe they don't think they're a good fit for the program to apply. So a lot of our work is actually outbound rather than waiting for inbound applications to come in, and that increases the quality. Our targets and KPIs that we structure around our program are very much focused on the quality of the final applicant pool, and by the time we get to the application phase, our program teams are already pretty familiar with the companies that have come through because we've done so much outbound research, which goes to the or outbound outreach, which goes to the point of don't shortchange yourself on how long it's going to take. Sourcing is a year-long process. It doesn't just start and end with a program. It's something that you should be constantly doing. And then when you do actually have a program in place, like our sourcing tends to be around 4 months or so.
Excellent. And Paul, do you have more to share?
I think for us, the biggest challenge has been, and I'm amazed at hearing how all of you have been selecting companies as a cohort and doing diligence simultaneously. I think for us, the biggest struggle has been doing diligence at scale. And I think Bangs alluded to this. I think selecting 10 companies at the same time and doing very detailed diligence on that has been a challenge. And why is it a challenge for us? Because we don't have a kind of a typical accelerator cohort-driven model, and because our incubation support is extended over 2 to 3 years and we're putting enough capital behind them, we realize that we need to select a few, but the most appropriate, maybe not the best, but that means actually doing greater diligence. So doing diligence at scale has always been a challenge for us, and our numbers have been very low on that. A senior team member with another junior team member at best can do 2 companies in a quarter, which means really creating a very solid ground level site visit plan, talking to stakeholders, figuring out whether an exit is possible and how that can be, who are downstream investors. So I think a biggest struggle has been diligence at scale, and diligence for a cohort of 15 to 20 companies. We've struggled with it because we found that the diagnostics that we do as a result is really poor because it doesn't get to specifics which really help pivot the business model each of these companies.
Great. And we had one question that came in here on the side, which especially for those like Kalsum and Bajar who brought programs into young ecosystems, what were the changes that needed to be made in the local context? And we do need to say goodbye to Paul, who needs to leave, but thank you so much for joining us. And we'll wrap up after this question.
Sorry, did you want me to answer that question?
Yes, please.
Changes have we made? Yes. So I think that what's really important, right? So just to give a little bit of background on our program, I mean, when we started Eye2Eye's accelerator program, it was basically our first cohort was like our guinea pig cohort. Like, I don't think I knew what I was doing back then. This was back in 2012. But then we actually ended up really designing our curriculum with the help of a program in Brazil as well as a program in Denmark, where we kind of, mashed it together. And then what ended up happening was that we had to continuously iterate that program over time. So we actually do rapid iteration. We don't just generally gauge at the end of our program. We actually measure after. As I mentioned, we have 6 weekends over 4 months. So after the end of every weekend, we were actually surveying our entrepreneurs and getting feedback. And then we do a massive, sorry, it's so late here, so my brain has not stopped working. But basically, we do a massive understanding of what people really need in the beginning of our program in order to get a litmus of what we need to build for. So we also work that into the curriculum. There's just a lot in Pakistan too that I think is really important when you take the local context into place. And so thinking about it from a legal angle, from a accounting angle, like all the different regulatory side, I think that's really the parts of the curriculum that we also adapted for. We also just released a startup toolkit in Pakistan it's like a 101 legal guide for all entrepreneurs in the country on how to launch and build your business. And we realized there was a need for all of that, right? So I think when you're in a young ecosystem, I think you end up having to solve for so much more than just building a program. Right. So I can talk forever about that, so I'll let also talk more too.
Thank you. And Eva, believe you had something to share as well.
Yeah, I've taken the same approach. It's rapid iteration where we are designing and customizing from the outset in terms of when we do our diagnostics and when we go into that community. I think before we even begin design, what is pivotal is what I call relationship building, and that can take up to 3 months, and that's really getting a sense of that local ecosystem on the ground and finding out, because for me it's not just about the program that you're going to go and deliver, but for it to have long-term impact, what is the post-program support? And you can only have that with your local partners on the ground, so you have to be doing that from the outset and taking them on the journey with you. In terms of our iteration, it's happening like week to week, based on what I'm seeing as a practitioner and as a deliverer, and we're getting constant feedback and we're changing our approach, and I think that's what I've learned. You have to do that. Yeah.
Thank you, Eva. And final comment, Pamela, would you like to share a couple thoughts?
I just had a comment on the challenges and what we've learned, and you know, we've been doing this for a while and we're constantly learning, but with respect to this discussion, we've been talking about how much time we spend interviewing and getting people into our cohorts and such. And so one of the things that we've done just over the last year or 18 months is looking at, so why are people falling out? So we select a cohort of 15 to 20, but we rarely end the cohort, whether it's 6 months or 9 months, depending on the program, with that number. And so why are people dropping out? And what we found is that a large majority of those people, the entrepreneurs, were dropping out because they had to go fundraise. They're running out of money, and so they had a higher priority, which understandably they need to make the payroll, so they had to go and fundraise. So one of the questions that in the quarterfinalist interviews that our program manager now asks is, what's their runway? And we want to see at least 6 months of runway so that then we know that they can at least go through our program and not be distracted with fundraising. So I think it's important to understand, look at why things are happening. Like you said, people are falling out of your cohorts and getting and not finishing and solving to that. And that was one of our solutions to that issue. So. Yeah, lots of learnings always, though.
Great, thanks. And Steph, if you can put up the slides. Beautiful. Well, thank you all so much for sharing your perspectives, your insights, your questions. As a reminder, we do have 3 more webinars that are coming up here. Oh, hopefully the screen share will work. Great. So our next one is coming up on June 29th, Australian time, and we'll be looking at developing innovative business models and sustainable revenue streams. And explicitly, this is business models for accelerator programs, not for the ventures that are running through those programs. And so we'll be joined again with Miller Center for Social Entrepreneurship, Vilgro, Kanara Indonesia, and Fledge. And then we have another webinar coming up on July 6th. It will be around measuring and managing impact. We will also be joined there by Fledge, Uncharted, and Akina. And on July 11th, we will be looking at building strong relationships and networks. And that will be with SecondMuse, Community.org, Invest to Innovate, and Akina Foundation as well. For all of these webinars, you can register using the link below, bit.ly/FI webinars. And as a final reminder, our applications do close on July 31st. So please go to frontierincubators.com to be able to join the application process. And we love to hear from you. So please email us at hello@frontierincubators.org. If you have any questions, comments, would like to nominate somebody for the application process, we would love to hear from you. But thank you all so much for making the time. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.